There really isn't a regular day. Um, my days right now are filled with doing new student interviews. Um, my days at the beginning of the school year are filled with doing schedules. Um, there are slow times and there are fast times. So, like as a school counselor, I do scheduling and I do your college class stuff, and I help you guys with financial aid or college applications or things like that. And then I do recruitment fairs also. Um, but if any of that stuff isn't going on, then my job is, and the job of a counselor a lot of times is to be available. So if a student has a moment, you know, whether that's a personal crisis or something's going on at home, or they were just upset today for whatever reason, you know, we need to be available so that we can drop whatever it is that we're doing and see to that person at the time. Because if a student is, let's say, going through a crisis, um, you can't just tell them to wait. Okay, you can't just be like, oh, we'll go back to class. I'll come get you when I can. You have to be able to drop what it is that you're doing right now and tend to that situation to make sure that it's not something super serious.
Okay. What's the most difficult event that takes place during your job, like your working day?
Sometimes it's just the unexpected, because sometimes those things do happen where you have to drop what it is that you're doing, and if you have other things that need to be done or you're really busy, you know, it's difficult to try and manage that stuff. But also, I think the most difficult thing about any counselor job is the stories that you'll have to hear and the information that you have to know. You know, I mean, as a school counselor, I don't see a lot of it, but there are stuff that happens. Like at the last school I worked at, one of my favorite students, who's turning his life around. So I mean, he's made some bad choices and had some bad influences outside of school. He was murdered, and he was shot in the back in an altercation. And then that was difficult because, you know, you spend every day with these kids. So from a personal standpoint, that was difficult. But I think what was most difficult was being the only counselor in a school that's really small, and you have to go around and notify everybody that one of their classmates was murdered, and then deal with that aftermath. So everyone was upset, obviously, and who are they going to talk to? You know, so when I'd come back after going to around 8 different classrooms to tell them all what had happened and, you know, what resources are available to you, I thought I was done, and I thought I could, you know, breathe a deep breath. And then I come back to my office and they tell me that I have a room full of 30 kids wanting to talk to me. And, you know, and you have to help them process those emotions, and they range from just being sad to wanting to be revengeful, you know, to just being angry or upset, and then it's like, you're still a person too, so you still have all those emotions too. So you have to figure out, how am I going to deal with my emotions, but also how am I going to help others work with their emotions in a way that's healthy.
How do you deal with your emotions when things like that come in place?
It's not easy. I mean, some days are better than others. I think what helps is that you have a good handle on who you are as a person and where your sources of strength are and where your support system is. Because if you come in as a counselor and you don't have the ability to take care of yourself, this is something us counselors say all the time. You are not in a position to take care of anybody else if you cannot take care of yourself first. And so that goes along with, how do you de-stress? What are the things that you do to take care of yourself? Who is it that you can talk to if something happens? And so I have to know where those are. I have to know what keeps me calm. And the other thing is you need to learn to separate yourself. So some counselors and people working in social service professions, so social workers, physicians, teachers, some of them, they can get too attached. So it's important to realize that, yes, I love you guys. You guys are awesome. Okay, you're the best. But I'm not going to take all of this stuff that happens here home with me. So you have to learn how to separate yourself from the situation and not let it consume you.
Okay. What's the most difficult obstacle you had to overcome to get to where you are right now?
That's education. I mean, to be a counselor, you have to have a master's degree, okay? But school didn't come easy. I mean, I was okay at school, but I wasn't great at school. I struggled a lot. Academically, you know, my parents didn't go to college, so my mom and my stepdad went for like a semester and then dropped out. My mom didn't graduate from high school. So while I was in college, I didn't have much of a family support to help me through when things got difficult. So I kind of had to figure things out on my own, and as a result, I struggled. I really enjoyed school, but it was a struggle for me to earn good grades. You know, I'd study for 10 hours for an exam to get a C, and that's depressing when you lock yourself in a room that long. And then it's also the financial side of things that come with paying for school. My parents didn't have a lot of money, and you know, I worked at Dairy Queen while I was in college, but then once you graduate from your bachelor's degree, you don't get the same types of financial aid that you would get for your first degree as you do for like a master's degree. So my master's degree was paid for entirely by student loans. And so I felt that the value of that was worth the cost. But, you know, making those financial decisions is hard.
What advice would you give a person that's pursuing the career you have?
Understand that while counselors have to have a master's degree, they don't get paid the same as other people with master's degrees. So if I had earned a master's in business administration, if I had received an MBA, chances are I'd be making a lot more than what I'm making now. I'm not saying I don't make a good living, because here, a lot of places, especially in education, you get paid based off of your level of education. So with a doctorate, I'm at that highest level for education. And so they pay you in steps for a lot of places in education. But if you're working for a community resource company, you know, I used to work for the Guidance Center up in Flagstaff, and they had crisis workers and social workers and an inpatient unit and stuff like that. Their master's level counselors only got paid around $35,000 a year. Okay, when if you look at master's degrees in other professions, they make 60, 70, 80, you know, depending on what they're doing and how long they've been there. So for me, like anything, it's cost versus worth. Okay, it's going to cost you something to get that education. It's going to cost you something to be in that profession. You know, whether that's it's costing you work, the type of hours that you're keeping, or the pay that you're receiving, but what is it worth to you? Okay, so for me, the value of working in this environment in an educational institution and with students that care about their education, and the value of being off at 3:30 in the afternoon and having my summers off greatly outweighs, you know, the cost of, you know, getting paid a little less.
Yeah. Did I ask this?
What did you know you wanted?
How did you know?
Oh, how did you know you wanted to become a counselor?
I didn't.
You didn't.
I kind of fell into it. So when I started out in college, back when I was your age, 14 years ago, I went to college to be a physical therapist. My first major was exercise science, but like I said, I struggled. So things like anatomy and chemistry just didn't click with me. And so I decided to change my major to psychology because it was my minor, and I had already taken a couple classes, and I had no idea what I was going to do with it, but it sounded interesting, so that was cool. But because I started college when I was 17, I graduated when I was 21. And at 21, I was just kind of like, well, I'm not ready for a real job, so I'll go to more school. And I had an advisor. Well, she wasn't an advisor. She was one of my psychology professors who I admired greatly. And she encouraged me to apply to the master's program. And the master's program that I was in is clinical health psychology. So you learn a lot of clinical skills, things needed to be a counselor with a health emphasis. And so she told me that if I applied, I would get in. So I didn't have any better options. So I applied and I got it. And I did that. And I thought, well, you know, I'll be a substance abuse counselor. I'll work in substance abuse. My dad's an alcoholic. And I saw how our family was destroyed by alcohol. And so I thought that by working with a rehab population or working as a counselor for substance abuse, that I could help the families by helping that one individual. And so I went and I worked in a substance abuse rehab unit for 2 years along with a psychiatric acute care. So if a person is threatening to kill themselves, this is where they send you. Okay, so I worked there for 2 years, and then after that point, I kind of got burned out and thought, maybe this isn't the environment for me. It was just kind of too exhausting. And then I was graduating with my master's, and I thought to myself, and I said, I need to find a job and I thought of all of these things, that promotes education, that works with special populations, and that pays me what I want to get paid. And I saw an ad on Craigslist for a high school counselor. and I applied and I got the job. And so, you know, I never, if you would have asked me in college if I wanted to be a high school counselor, I would have said, no way. But in doing that, I realized, like, and now that I've been a high school counselor for 7 years, I've realized that this is actually
what you wanted to be.
Everything just fits perfectly because I value education very much. And I've seen how education can move people forward. You know, my mom didn't graduate from high school, and she worked 2 jobs. And we'd go with her to her second job to go clean other people's houses. And I told myself when I was in high school that I don't ever want to work as hard as my mother has had to work. And I don't ever want anyone telling me how to vacuum, because that pissed me off. I had a lady tell me I was vacuuming wrong when I was in high school because I was helping my mom, and I don't ever want anyone telling me how I'm going to vacuum. And so I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that profession. My mom worked hard. She worked very hard, and she did what she had to do. But I don't want to work that hard.
True.
And so I saw how education is a so education doesn't guarantee that you're going to make more money, okay? But education helps put you up forward so that if you have the motivation to do more, that education gives you your foot in the door, okay? And I valued education, and I wanted to help other people who were like me, who have parents that didn't go to college or didn't graduate from high school, or who have parents who were in prison, because my dad was in prison too. And so, you know, it wasn't easy growing up. And I saw how it's helped me, so I want to help others. That's why we become counselors, because we go through something and we want to help other people go through stuff too, because we can overcome it and we know they can. So I realized that it was the perfect place for me.
With the degree that you have, could you have maybe taken a different route?
Sure. I could have taken a lot of different routes. Psychology for a lot of people is kind of like a exploration. So I could have stayed in health psychology. You know, health psychologists do things like hypnosis and biofeedback, and they study personalities and heart disease, and you know, I could have done a lot of different things. And if I had pursued a doctorate in a different direction, so my doctorate's in education, and that's because I love education. But I could have taken my master's degree and gone in any different direction. You know, there's cognitive psychologists which study the brain. I was really into my psychopharmacology and psychophysiology classes, which is basically the study of chemicals within the brain, and how it relates to psychological disorders. And so if I were to have continued on that path and gotten a doctorate in something like that, you know, I could be working in a lab. So people that major in psychology, one, it's important to know that if you're wanting to make a profession out of psychology, it's important to have an advanced degree. So a master's degree and even a doctorate, depending on what you want to do. So psychologists can be clinicians. They can, you know, work in their own private practice. They can be a counselor like I am. or they can work in labs where they're researching stuff. One of my friends in my master's program, he worked for Barrow Neurological Institute, and he was doing research all day. Psychologists also do research within the universities and research with other organizations, and so it just depends on what type of psychology you want to focus on. I mean, there's a lot of different things, and then there's those people that major in psychology and don't do anything in the field. They go work in human resources, or they go work in business, or they become a teacher for something that isn't psychology.
True.
So there's a lot of different options. Just having a bachelor's degree opens the door anyways. Doesn't matter what it's in sometimes. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can explore, which is the nice thing about it.
Okay, that's it.
It?
Yeah.
I was on a roll.
She was ready.
Yeah,
Hey,
she
I'm
was.
pumped.
Well, thank you.
You're not still recording, right?
Thank you. Yeah.